Ever wondered why some people seem impossible to understand? In Surrounded by Fools, Thomas Erikson reveals the secret behind human behavior, showing us how to decode personalities and communicate with anyone, at work, at home, or anywhere. Let's dive in and stop feeling surrounded by fools. We live in a world surrounded by people who see things differently, speak differently, and react differently. Yet we often expect everyone to think the way we do. That's where communication starts to fall apart. In Surrounded by Fools, Thomas Erikson explores why misunderstandings are so common and how we can finally learn to connect with others no matter their personality type. The book builds on the concept of the four color personalities: red, blue, green, and yellow, each representing a different communication and behavior style. Reds are bold and decisive. Blues are analytical and detail-oriented. Greens are calm and caring. Yellows are creative and enthusiastic. Understanding these colors, Erikson argues, is the key to avoiding daily frustration and building real understanding. But Surrounded by Fools isn't just about identifying types, it's about recognizing our blind spots. Erikson dives into how ego, assumptions, and emotional bias distort communication. He shows how even smart, well-meaning people can turn into fools when they failed to read others correctly. The result? Conflict, confusion, and wasted energy. Through vivid examples and humor, Erikson turns psychology into a mirror, one that helps us see ourselves clearly, not to judge, but to improve. The book reminds us that emotional intelligence is not about being nice all the time, it's about being aware, adaptable, and genuinely interested in others. So if you've ever thought, why don't people just understand me? This book offers a refreshing truth. Maybe the key isn't changing others, but learning how to speak their language. If you love exploring how the human mind works, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Read and Rise, and join us as we decode the art of communication. Chapter 1. Why Communication Fails So Easily. Thomas Erikson opens with the simple but uncomfortable truth. Most of our problems come from miscommunication, not malice. We don't usually intend to misunderstand each other, but we do, all the time. Why? Because we assume others see the world through the same mental lens we do. He paints a relatable scene. You're trying to explain something perfectly logical, yet the other person just doesn't get it. You get frustrated. They get defensive. Soon, emotion replaces logic, and what started as a small misunderstanding becomes a full-blown argument. Erikson calls this the communication gap, the space between how we intend to express something and how it is actually received. At the heart of this gap are the four color types. Each type interprets tone, words, and intentions differently. A red person wants results, not details. If you take too long to get to the point, they'll lose interest. A blue wants logic and precision. Vague statements drive them crazy. A yellow listens with enthusiasm but may miss fine details because they think in big pictures. A green wants harmony. They avoid confrontation even when they disagree. Erikson explains that when these types interact without awareness, friction is inevitable. Imagine a red boss giving rapid-fire orders to a blue employee who wants detailed instructions, or a yellow salesperson pitching to a green client who just wants reassurance. The result? Both walk away thinking the other is impossible to deal with. But Erikson's key insight is empowering. The responsibility to adapt lies with you. It's not about forcing others to change, but about recognizing their language and adjusting your approach. Communication, he argues, is not a power game. It's a dance. When one partner changes their rhythm slightly, the entire interaction can flow better. By the end of the chapter, Erikson leaves readers with a practical challenge. Stop assuming that others think like you do. Once you accept that everyone filters reality differently, you unlock the first secret of understanding others: humility. Chapter 2. The Four Colors Understanding Human Nature. In this chapter, Thomas Erikson takes us on a deeper dive into the four-color system, the heart of his model for understanding people. He explains that every person operates primarily through one of these colors, though most of us carry a blend. Knowing these differences doesn't put people in boxes, it frees us from the illusion that everyone should act like us. Red, the dominant and driven type. Reds are natural-born leaders. They move fast, talk fast, and think fast. Their world revolves around results, competition, and control. A red person says things like, "Just do it. What's the point?" Or, "We're wasting time." They dislike inefficiency and tend to appear impatient, but their directness often masks good intentions. Reds get things done when others are still planning, yet their challenge lies in empathy. They can bulldoze others without realizing it. Blues, the analytical and cautious type. Blues are perfectionists. They live by systems, rules, and structure. Facts are their comfort zone. When a blue asks a question, it's not to annoy you. It's because they genuinely want to understand every detail. Their motto could be, "If it's worth doing right." But under pressure, blues can become overly critical, skeptical, or rigid. They often struggle with people who go with the flow, especially yellows. Greens, the calm and reliable type. Greens are the peacekeepers of the world. They avoid drama, value stability, and always put others first. They're good listeners and empathetic, but they fear conflict more than anything. Greens want everyone to feel comfortable, which can make them slow to make decisions or assert opinions. In a fast-paced team, their calmness can be grounding, yet sometimes it becomes passivity. Yellows, the energetic and inspirational type. Yellows are the sunshine in human form. They thrive on energy, imagination, and human connection. A yellow is that friend who starts a project with passion and sometimes forgets to finish it. They're creative communicators, inspiring leaders, and excellent motivators, but their enthusiasm can sometimes turn into distraction or impulsivity. Erikson emphasizes that none of these colors is better than another. Each one brings unique strengths and unique blind spots. The goal isn't to change your color, but to understand it so you can adapt to others without losing yourself. He invites readers to reflect, which color are you most of the time, and which color do you clash with the most? Usually, our biggest communication struggles happen with our opposite color. Reds clash with greens, blues with yellows, not because they dislike each other, but because they see the world through entirely different filters. By understanding these differences, Erikson says we can begin to build bridges where walls used to stand.
Chapter 3. How we misread each other. Thomas Erikson begins this chapter with a paradox. The better we think we understand people, the more likely we are to misunderstand them. Most people assume they're good communicators. After all, they've been talking all their lives. But Erikson explains that what we call understanding is often just projection. We listen through our own filters, interpret through our own emotions, and judge others by how we would behave in their place. He illustrates this with a simple example. Imagine a red boss sends a short, blunt email. "Fix this report." To a fellow red, this sounds efficient and clear. To a blue, it might sound incomplete or rude. Where's the context, the explanation? To a yellow, it feels cold and discouraging. No warmth or enthusiasm. To a green, it might trigger anxiety. Did I do something wrong? Same words, four entirely different emotional worlds. Erikson's point is that communication is never just about words. It's about perception. Each color type processes tone, rhythm, and intent differently. We think we're being clear, but clarity depends on who's listening, not who's speaking. He encourages readers to pay attention not only to what people say, but how they respond. If someone withdraws, changes tone, or becomes defensive, it's not always because they're overreacting. It may simply mean you're speaking the wrong language for their type. One of Erikson's most powerful metaphors in this chapter is that every person carries their own communication manual, but it's written in invisible ink. You only learn to read it when you start observing, listening, and adapting. He also warns against labeling people too quickly. While the color system helps simplify human behavior, real people are complex blends. A blue might act like a red under pressure, or a green might show surprising leadership when pushed. The system isn't a cage, it's a compass, meant to guide, not define. By the end of the chapter, Erikson offers a humbling insight. When you think someone is a fool, there's a good chance they're thinking the same about you. In other words, the key to better communication isn't persuasion, it's empathy. You can't force others to listen, but you can make it easier for them to understand you by meeting them halfway. This chapter feels like a gentle mirror, uncomfortable, yes, but necessary. It reminds us that self-awareness is the first step towards mastering the art of connection.
Chapter 4. The Ego Trap, When You Become the Fool. Thomas Erikson begins this chapter with a disarming confession. Even the most self-aware people occasionally become the very fools they complain about. The reason, he says, is simple. Ego. Our ego tells us that we're right, reasonable, and logical, and that others are the ones who need to change. He writes that communication collapses not because people lack intelligence, but because they lack humility. When your ego takes the wheel, your mind stops listening. You start interpreting everything as a personal challenge or insult. A simple disagreement becomes a battle for dominance. Erikson describes how this looks across the 4 color types. Red personalities, driven by results, let ego fuel their competitiveness. They push harder when challenged, sometimes crushing collaboration without realizing it. Blues, who pride themselves on logic, can let ego morph into perfectionism. They become so obsessed with being correct that they forget to be kind. Yellows, eager for approval, let ego make them the center of attention, talking more than they listen. Grains, though calm on the surface, protect their ego by withdrawing completely. They shut down instead of speaking up and quietly resent it later. Erikson doesn't frame this as moral failure, but as a universal human flaw. Everyone, regardless of color, has moments when they defend their image instead of seeking understanding. The tragedy is that ego thrives on misunderstanding. It needs conflict to survive. He offers a simple test to spot when ego takes over. If you're focusing more on winning the conversation than on learning, you've already fallen into the trap. The antidote, he says, is self-awareness. To communicate effectively, you must be willing to question your assumptions, pause before reacting, and sometimes even let others be right. Real strength, he argues, lies in flexibility, not dominance. One of the most striking metaphors in the chapter compares ego to tinted glasses. Once you put them on, everything you see is distorted, but you don't realize it. You keep insisting the world is tinted, not your lenses. Erikson invites readers to remove those lenses through reflection. When you feel misunderstood, ask yourself first, could I be the one missing something? That question alone, he says, can transform your relationships. The chapter ends on a hopeful note. If communication is a dance, ego is the part of us that refuses to follow the rhythm. But once you recognize it, you can step back into sync and rediscover the flow of genuine connection.
Chapter 5. The Art of Adapting. How to Speak So Others Can Hear You. In this chapter, Thomas Erikson moves from theory to practice. After showing us why communication fails, he now teaches us how to make it work. The key, he says, lies in one word: adaptation.
Adapting doesn't mean faking or pretending to be someone else. It means tuning your message so it resonates with the listener's frequency. Just like a radio, every person has their own channel, and if you speak on the wrong one, your words turn into static. Erikson reminds us that most people communicate to express themselves, not to connect. But true communication is about the receiver, not the sender. You succeed not when you've said everything you wanted to say, but when the other person truly understands it. Then he walks us through how to adapt to each color type. With reds, be concise, clear, and confident. Get straight to the point, skip the fluff. They respect strength and decisiveness, not over-explanation. Show results, not feelings. With blues, slow down. Provide details, structure, and evidence. Don't exaggerate or improvise. They want reliability and precision. If you don't know, say so honestly. With greens, approach gently and avoid confrontation. Show appreciation for their effort, listen patiently, and create a calm, safe atmosphere. Greens open up when they feel respected. With yellows, keep it lively and engaging. Use stories, humor, and energy. Show enthusiasm, but also gently help them focus when ideas start to fly in all directions. The secret, Erikson says, is flexibility. When you adjust your tone, pacing, and words to fit the person in front of you, communication stops being a clash of egos and becomes a shared rhythm. You don't lose authenticity by adapting. You actually amplify it because your message lands where it matters. He uses a powerful analogy. A wise communicator is like water. It takes the shape of any container it enters, yet remains itself. Erikson also warns that refusing to adapt is a subtle form of arrogance. When you insist on being understood only in your own way, you're essentially saying, "My comfort matters more than our connection." The chapter ends with a challenge. Try to speak the language of at least one person you struggle with. Notice how the dynamic changes. Often just a small shift, a softer tone, a clearer explanation, a moment of listening can turn resistance into cooperation. It's not manipulation. It's maturity. It's the skill of being human in a world full of different minds. Chapter 6. The Silent Language. What we say without words. Thomas Erikson begins this chapter by reminding us that communication is much more than words. In fact, most of what we say never comes out of our mouths. Our posture, tone, facial expressions, even the pauses between sentences, all send messages louder than speech. He calls this the silent language, and it's the most universal and most misread form of communication. The irony is that while we spend years learning to speak and write, few of us ever learn to read body language properly. Erikson describes how each color type unconsciously expresses themselves non-verbally. Reds use sharp gestures and maintain direct eye contact. Their tone is assertive, sometimes intimidating, but rarely uncertain. When they cross their arms, it's not always hostility. Sometimes it's focus. Blues are controlled and deliberate. They maintain distance, speak calmly, and rarely interrupt. Their silence often means thinking, not disapproval. Greens have open, soft body language. They nod often, smile gently, and use subtle expressions to show empathy. But when uncomfortable, they physically withdraw, shrinking their presence to avoid conflict. Yellows are animated, expressive, and full of movement. They use their hands, faces, and eyes to tell stories. But this expressiveness can overwhelm quieter types, especially blues and greens. Erikson emphasizes that misunderstanding these signals is one of the biggest sources of conflict. For example, a red might think a green is indifferent because they stay quiet, while the green is actually just trying to stay polite. Or a blue may misinterpret a yellow's enthusiasm as carelessness when it's simply passion expressed differently. The real danger, Erikson says, is assuming your own interpretation is the truth. Our brains are meaning-making machines. We fill gaps with assumptions. When someone looks away while we talk, we assume boredom or guilt, when they might just be thinking or tired. To bridge this gap, Erikson suggests a powerful technique. Mirror and observe, but don't judge. Notice body language patterns over time, not single moments. Ask gentle, clarifying questions instead of assuming motives. For example, "You seem a bit distracted. Is this a bad time?" That single question can prevent hours of tension. He also reminds us that silence is communication too. Sometimes, saying nothing can speak volumes. It can show respect, anger, sadness, or reflection. Learning when not to speak is one of the highest forms of social intelligence. Erikson closes the chapter with a line that captures the essence of his message. Words may convince the mind, but body language convinces the heart. When we learn to read that silent dialogue in ourselves and others, we stop seeing fools around us and start seeing humans trying their best to connect.
Chapter 7. When Communication Breaks Down, Conflict and Misunderstanding. Thomas Erikson opens this chapter with a hard truth. No matter how skilled you are at reading people, conflict is inevitable. The question isn't whether you'll misunderstand someone, it's how you'll handle it when it happens. Most of us, he says, respond to conflict by doubling down on our own style instead of adapting. We speak louder, explain more, argue harder, all in the hope that the other person will finally understand. But this only deepens the gap. Why? Because in moments of tension, each color type retreats into its comfort zone, and that's precisely when communication collapses. Erikson describes how this plays out. Reds become even more dominant. Under stress, they stop listening and start issuing orders. They believe that pushing harder will solve the problem. Blues retreat into logic and data. They shut down emotionally and begin analyzing every word. This often makes emotional types feel ignored or dismissed. Yellows get defensive or overly emotional. They may joke, deflect, or exaggerate to escape the discomfort. Greens withdraw completely, hoping the storm will pass. Their silence can be misunderstood for agreement or indifference, which only fuels more frustration. In short, when we're under stress, we stop communicating and start protecting ourselves. Erikson argues that the first step to managing conflict isn't about talking, it's about awareness. Notice your instinctive reactions. Are you getting louder, quieter, more sarcastic? Each reaction tells you which color mode you've slipped into. Once you see it, you can consciously shift gears. He shares a valuable rule. In every conflict, there are two truths, yours and theirs. The bridge is built when you look for the third one, understanding. To get there, he recommends a three-step approach. 1. Pause before reacting. Take a breath. Silence buys clarity. 2. Acknowledge emotion first. Logic comes later. Validation always comes first. 3. Ask instead of assume. Simple questions like, "Can you help me understand what you meant?" can disarm even the toughest exchanges. Erikson also reminds us that not every battle is worth fighting. Many arguments stem from differences in communication style, not actual disagreement. Learning to recognize that saves enormous time and energy. Perhaps the most profound lesson in this chapter is that conflict, when handled wisely, is not a sign of failure. It's an opportunity for growth.
True understanding often begins the moment we stop trying to win and start trying to connect. The chapter ends with a simple reflection. The biggest fool in any argument is the one who forgets to listen. Chapter 8. The Art of Adaptation, Mastering the Language of Colors. Thomas Erikson begins by stating something deceptively simple. To be understood, you must first learn to speak the language of others. We often assume that being clear means saying things our way, but Erikson flips that idea. True clarity comes from entering the listener's world. The ability to adapt your communication style to match another person's color type is not manipulation, it's empathy in action. He describes adaptation as a kind of linguistic flexibility. Each color has its own grammar, rhythm, and emotional tone. When you learn these languages, you're no longer surrounded by fools, you're surrounded by teachers. Let's look at how that plays out in practice. Speaking to Reds. Be direct, brief, and confident. Don't waste time with small talk. Reds respect clarity and action. If you want a Red to listen, get to the point, show results, and avoid over-explaining. Speaking to Blues, provide structure and details. Blues hate vagueness. Give them facts, evidence, and a clear plan. Respect their need for precision and don't rush them into emotional decisions. Speaking to Yellows, start with warmth. They respond to enthusiasm and connection before content. Use stories, humor, and energy, but make sure your positivity is genuine, not forced. Speaking to Greens, slow down. Greens value calm and harmony. Don't pressure them into quick choices. Show appreciation, listen fully, and avoid confrontation. They open up when they feel safe. Erikson calls this emotional code switching. The more fluent you become in each color's emotional language, the less friction you experience in daily life. But he also issues a warning. Adaptation is not self-erasure. You're not pretending to be someone else. You're translating your ideas so others can actually hear them. Authenticity, he insists, is the foundation of all effective communication. To practice this art, Erikson suggests a simple exercise. Every time you talk to someone, ask yourself, 1. What color are they likely to be? 2. What does that mean for how I should speak, listen, and respond? Over time, this awareness becomes second nature. You begin to notice subtle cues, tone, pacing, body language, and adjust accordingly. The result? Conversations become smoother, relationships stronger, and misunderstandings rarer. You stop wasting energy trying to fix people and start connecting with them as they are. Erikson closes the chapter with one of his most elegant lines. The moment you adapt, communication transforms from a battle into a dance. And that, he says, is where emotional intelligence truly begins, not in knowing everything, but in knowing how to listen differently to everyone.
Chapter 9. Colors at Work, Turning Chaos into Collaboration. Thomas Erikson begins this chapter with an observation every employee has felt. The office is not just a workplace, it's a social experiment in communication gone wrong. Every project, meeting, and deadline is essentially a communication challenge between different personality colors. Understanding this, Erikson argues, is what separates dysfunctional teams from high-performing ones. He starts by illustrating how each color behaves in the workplace. Reds are the natural drivers. They want results, progress, and action. Their energy is contagious, but their impatience can make others feel bulldozed. Reds hate long meetings, small talk, or unnecessary details. Blues are the planners and perfectionists. They build systems, track data, and keep the organization running smoothly. But their love for precision can clash with fast-moving reds or spontaneous yellows. Yellows bring creativity, optimism, and enthusiasm.
They energize the team, brainstorm ideas, and motivate others. Yet they often struggle with focus or follow-through, frustrating the more methodical blues. Greens are the stabilizers, calm, steady, and supportive. They maintain harmony, reduce tension, and quietly ensure everyone feels heard. Their biggest weakness: reluctance to speak up when conflict arises. In most workplaces, Erikson says, the tension isn't caused by incompetence, it's caused by incompatibility. A boss might think an employee is lazy when they're actually just green, avoiding confrontation. A red might view a blue as negative when they're simply cautious. He offers a compelling metaphor. Imagine a workplace as an orchestra. Each color is an instrument. Chaos only comes when everyone tries to play the same melody instead of harmonizing. So how do we create harmony? Erikson outlines a few key principles. 1. Recognize strengths before weaknesses. When people feel valued for their color, they're more open to adjusting their weaknesses. 2. Adapt leadership to color. A yellow leader might motivate with enthusiasm, while a blue one should lead through clarity and consistency. There is no perfect leadership style, only the one that fits the team's mix. 3. Use conflict as information. When colors clash, that's data. It shows where expectations, pace, or priorities are mismatched. Don't suppress it, analyze it. He even gives practical advice for mixed color meetings. Start with a brief agenda for the blues. Keep the energy high for the yellows. Leave room for questions and reassurance for the greens. Finish with clear decisions for the reds. By doing so, meetings become shorter, clearer, and, surprisingly, more enjoyable. Perhaps the most powerful takeaway in this chapter is Erikson's claim that understanding people is a productivity skill. When communication improves, so does efficiency, morale, and even creativity. He concludes with this insight. You can't change people, but you can create an environment where everyone's color shines instead of collides. That, Erikson insists, is how you turn a team of fools into a symphony of collaboration. Chapter 10. The Social Intelligence, Living with Colors Every Day. Thomas Erikson opens the final chapter with a powerful observation. Life is a sea of colors. The better you understand them, the less you feel surrounded by fools. This chapter shifts focus from theory to application in real life. Erikson emphasizes that understanding personality types isn't just a workplace tool, it's a life skill. Every conversation, relationship, and decision is influenced by how we perceive and adapt to others. He highlights several key lessons. 1. Awareness before action. The first step is to recognize the color types in your life: family, friends, colleagues, even strangers. This awareness helps you anticipate reactions, prevent conflicts, and communicate more effectively. 2. Flexibility is the core skill. Erikson reminds readers that communication isn't about dominance or persuasion. It's about adjusting your style to match the other person without losing your authenticity. When you adapt, you reduce friction and create harmony. 3. Listening is more powerful than speaking. True social intelligence is about listening first, not talking. Paying attention to words, tone, and body language, all filtered through the color lens, allows you to respond in a way that connects, not confronts. 4. Conflict is an opportunity. Disagreements are inevitable, but they're also a chance to practice empathy and adaptation. Understanding why a red is blunt, a blue is cautious, a yellow is scattered, or a green is hesitant transforms frustration into insight. Erikson also stresses that mastering this skill is a lifetime journey. You won't become perfect at reading colors overnight. Misunderstandings will still happen, but each misstep is a lesson, a chance to refine perception, patience, and emotional awareness. He closes the book with an empowering thought. The world is not full of fools. It is full of people whose colors you have yet to understand. Learn the language of colors, and you will never feel isolated again. Erikson's message is clear. We are not surrounded by fools. We are surrounded by diversity. Once we learn to respect and adapt to that diversity, life becomes richer, relationships stronger, and communication far more effective. Thomas Erikson's Surrounded by Fools teaches us that understanding people isn't about labeling or judging. It's about empathy, awareness, and adaptation. Whether at work, home, or in everyday life, mastering the language of colors can transform conflict into connection and frustration into understanding. If you found these insights valuable, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Read and Rise, and turn on notifications to explore more wisdom from the world's most fascinating books.